where the clouds have passed and the seas have dried. The tears of Eden will bring new life. This I know will be, this I know, that all shall return again.
Good evening. We are small but mighty tonight. So I greet you in the name of all that is good, all that is holy, and all that is sacred, and in the warm and loving energy of this community Spiritual Life Center. I'm so very grateful to have you with us today, and so let's just take a moment to tune out and tune in. Take a nice deep breath. And as we move our attention within to our heart centers and allow the outside world to drop away, we give thanks for the opportunity to come together, to possibly have had a meal together, and then to come and sit and learn and expand our consciousness in a way that maybe we haven't thought of before, or in a way we have thought of before, but it will seem different to us this time. Every time we open our hearts to new ideas and to new learning, we grow in so many different ways. And it is such a privilege to be here together. And we say, thank you, God. Amen. Okay, I feel far away from you. So I have the big announcement is next week. This is a 3-part series, which you probably already knew. And tonight I'm going to just introduce mental healing, and then we'll talk about that a little bit. We might have a Q&A. I don't know where this one's going to go. Next week we'll really, just so you know, we'll really get into the nitty-gritty of it, and I'll have a handout, and we'll have some exercises to do. But if you haven't done much in the area of mental healing, then we had to have some sort of an introduction. Who is familiar with what they call mental healing or spiritual mind healing? Anybody? I mean, I know Patty has. Okay, okay. So, do you have the microphone, Patty? Yeah. So, I have a question: is what comes to your mind when we say mental healing? What comes to your mind? Feel free. There's no test here. You need the microphone. Yeah.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind is changing thought patterns is what comes to my mind.
Okay.
For me, I'm just kind of guessing, but I think, praying and hoping that I could heal myself.
Okay. Did you say hoping?
Yes.
Okay. What we're going to learn is to take us beyond hoping to actually being able to do it. So, and I just need to make sure and say that everything that we talk about in this class is not meant to replace medical treatment. If you are under treatment with a doctor or something, please don't run off and stop taking your meds. This is in addition to. So, okay. So spiritual mind healing, metaphysical healing, there's a lot of different things that this can be called. And I actually, Patty, my lovely assistant, and I had a conversation, well, if I call it mental healing, are people going to think we're talking about mental health? And so maybe by the time we're done, we can come up with a new name for it, because I'm going to be asking you to participate as we go along. But it's really the practice of aligning your thoughts with spirit, with the intelligent energy that is us, to bring us back into alignment, because we are built to be healthy. That's what nature intends for us, is for us to be healthy. And it's the way to affect physical healing, emotional healing, and spiritual healing. And some people call it prayer. The science of mind people, which are the centers for creative, what is it? The centers of... Center for spiritual. Anyway, the science of mind people, they call it treatment. And so in the third week, we will actually learn how to write either the healing prayer based on the way Unity does it, or a treatment based on the way they do it, or after we've done that, then you can come up with your own. So we will get to that point, then that will be week 3. So the question is can we just think illness away? We talk about every week, someone is up here talking about how our thoughts create our reality, what I think is what I get. And a lot of us do really well with that, except when it comes to our bodies. And so that the question is can I just think it away? And honestly, it's possible, but because we were taught so many things about believing in the material world and believing that there is something, if something's wrong with my body, it's solid and it's permanent, and I can't just think it away. And the truth is it's not magical, but it is a technique that can be learned. And there's a lot of people who have really, been healed over the years using mental healing or spiritual mental healing techniques. But let's do some history, just because it's kind of interesting. So, spiritual mind healing is ancient. I mean, you can go back to Socrates and find that process. You'll find even back then, saying what you're thinking is what you're creating in your life. And there was a German doctor named Franz Mesmer. Does that little name ring a bell? Okay. He believed that there was an invisible force. Now, he was in like the 1700s. And he believed there was an invisible natural force that we can tap into. And so he would put people into a trance, and he would work with them. And that's where mesmerism came from. And then, then it turned into what we now call hypnosis. And we know that, I don't know if, anybody's ever had any experience. Anybody had any experience with hypnosis? Did you affect some sort of change in your life, whether it was physical or emotional, by going through it? No? No, Pam? But it can be effective because it helps change what's going on in your subconscious. By the mid-1800s, as those of you who know anything about New Thought, this whole idea of healing and metaphysical thought was just exploding. In England and here, many countries around the world, it was like all of a sudden, it was like its time had come. And we had Phineas P. Quimby and Mary Baker Eddy, and she studied with him. And then Emma Curtis Hopkins, who studied with Mary Baker Eddy. Now, Mary Baker Eddy started Christian Science. And Christian Science was very much about healing mentally. You did it with prayer. You got your consciousness in the right place. And the difference between them and how we teach even now is that they don't go to doctors at all. They're not even allowed to. You don't go to a doctor. If you have to go to a doctor, then you're failing somehow. We in New Thought, whether it's Unity or the Science of Mind or Divine Science, any of the New Thought groups, we believe that they work together. I mean, if you're having a heart attack, I'm not going to ask you to stay there and try to ask you to pray your way out of it. Let's call the paramedics and let's get you taken care of. And then let's do the prayer work, right? So they work together. But then we had Emma Curtis Hopkins, who left Christian Science, and she started her own teaching because she was asking lots of questions. And Mary Baker Eddy was not big on being questioned at all. And this is not gossip. This is written all over the place. And so Emma started asking questions and developed her own way of working. And she never started a church. She had a seminary for a while. She never wrote a book. Any book you see of hers is people sat and they took notes during her lectures. And I'm just thinking these women must have had shorthand down because they got everything that she said. And so the Fillmores actually were ordained by her. They studied with her. Ernest Holmes studied with her. A lot of other people studied with her, and she's really kind of considered the mother of New Thought because so many people who started groups studied with her. And she was very, very big on the whole healing thing. Now, why was healing such a big deal back then? Anybody have an idea? Patty?
Well, because they didn't have the medicine and stuff that we have today, so they had to try something. and so that's why they did that. And I want to say that when I was first introduced to spiritual mind treatment, I thought it was about, like just positive thinking, just sitting there and kind of willing yourself well. But it's about connecting with spirit first, connecting with spirit and working with spirit to affect the change. It's not just, although change your thinking, change your life, but it's not just about positive thinking, so.
Yeah, I actually have a whole other thing I do called Beyond Positive Thinking because, you can just sit here and go, I'm not sick, I'm not sick, I'm not sick, I'm not sick. Oh, my head still hurts. Because it's more than just trying to wish it away. So thank you for that, Patty. There's the story of Myrtle Fillmore who had tuberculosis, and back in that day, that was very prevalent. And many people, I think several people in her family had died from tuberculosis. And so she sort of thought she was going along that same path. And she went to a lecture, and back then that was the entertainment. Oh, let's go to a lecture tonight. Let's put on our hats and go sit and listen to someone talk for a while. And something, I guess, in that conversation, Myrtle Fillmore heard that God is within us, in every cell in our body. God is within. And she walked out and she thought to herself, well, if God is within me, then I can't be sick because God can't be sick. Somehow she really got it. It made just total sense to her. And so she's proceeded to start doing her prayer work, her mental work. And I hadn't heard this story till a while ago, is that it took her a few months, that she didn't just sit down and go, okay, I'm going to pray this away. She sat for hours each day, working in meditation, connecting with spirit, really changing the way that she viewed, because she believed in tuberculosis. She believed that it was absolutely real, and who wouldn't, right? Because they were watching people die right and left. So, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But as we gained more medical knowledge and ability, some of that teaching started to fall away. You don't walk into Unity churches, and yes, there'll be people to pray with you, and yes, there'll be people to pray with healing, but it is not the primary focus. And when I came into New Thought in the 1970s, I opened one of my books the other day, and I had actually written down the date of 1977. But when I came into it, there was the big push on prosperity. And you will notice still that there's a lot of focus. And my guess, and I'm making this up, but I think I'm making it up from a logical source, is that by the time you hit the 1930s, you were getting antibiotics, you were getting more medicine, and you had a depression. So what became more important? The healing was important, but the prosperity sort of took over. And there was a while in the 70s and 80s where it was almost all about prosperity. And you really had to work to find the healing part of it. It was there, but you had to really go look for it. So we're starting to shift back. Have you noticed that? That there are more people are starting to look for alternatives to healing? Why do you think that is? Well, part of it is because a lot of the medications and stuff we have now don't work. Like antibiotics don't work, or people are becoming so over-medicated. I know people who they're being kept alive with medication, but they don't really have a life anymore. They're not being cured. They're not being healed. They're being kept alive. And so there is this idea of, how do we come back to healing ourselves? And not just physically, healing emotionally, mentally, So how do we get into this? And I was looking at all of the traditional teachers and how they teach this stuff, and I decided that I'm going to do it differently because we've changed. All of these books were written, let's see, probably 1912, 1938. This is, 38. Who knows when this was written? And all of the information is absolutely correct and accurate, but the language is so different from the way we speak now. So if I wanted to, if I wanted to talk to you about healing yourself, well, I was going to do this at the end, but let's just, close your eyes for a moment. And think about something that's going on with you, not a big thing, but maybe a little headache or some sore finger or something, some little thing. And just kind of be with it for a moment and see what your relationship is to it. Okay, go ahead and just open your eyes. Now, that little thing, how real is it to you? Do you think that if you sat long enough, you could dissolve it, let it go? Do you? Anybody think that that is just so real to them that they couldn't do that? This is okay. This is what we're going to learn. Please don't feel shy here. Yeah. Hang on a second. No, it's just that the people watching online can't hear you. Thank you.
I was sort of focusing on it and felt like fear,
Thank
Fear
you.
within it.
Yes. Yeah. 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 And so all of Carol.
I learned that if you sit with it and you acknowledge it and you say, I hear you, I have empathy with you, but now I would like you to relieve me of this pain. Generally, it goes away. Once you accept something, it's done. Mm-hmm. So it does help, not in every time, I imagine.
Right. And when we're talking about the big things, what we would call disease, I think all of us have little things going on, especially this particular age group right here. But there are things that we probably end up living with our whole lives. And so learning how to keep yourself in the best health that you can mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically is one thing. And then learning how to, when something comes along, how do you work with that? It's like I remember in the Episcopal Church, I went back there for a while when I couldn't find this kind of church to go to, and they had a thing during the service where people would come up and they would say it was a birthday or an anniversary or Thanksgiving. I think that's what they were. And a woman got up there, and I'd been in metaphysics for a long time, but I was listening, and this woman got up and she gave thanks for successful cancer surgery. And there was something about her, and I thought she believes in cancer more than she believes in God. It wasn't a judgment. It was just I could just kind of see that that's where she was with that. And so a lot of what we will be talking about in these next few weeks is looking at our belief system. What do we believe in? What can we change? How do we change it? And how do we work on healing for other people? I'm going to use the word treatment just because it's an easy word to use. How do we treat for other people? How do we pray for other people very specifically for healing? And specifically, we always think of physical healing, right? But a lot of people need emotional or spiritual healing as well. And so how do we do that? How do we learn to put ourselves in that place? And there's very much a difference between a healing and a curing. You can cure a headache, right? It'll go away. But if you don't heal, like the stress in your life, the headache's going to come back. Those of you, anybody in here familiar with Michael and Faith Moran? So, when she was diagnosed with the ailment that she had, they went around, to everywhere, the place that they could find, and looking for healing. And someone told me, I didn't know them really, but I was told that when they said that they finally learned the difference between curing and healing because they both had an emotional, spiritual healing even though her body did not heal and she moved, on to her next assignment. So I guess it comes down to what do we believe in, what do we want, and how do we change that, and how do we get connected with that? Does that make any sense? Okay. So, learning to figure out what you believe in more is probably one of the first steps. And so if you come around to the idea that there is only one energy, we say there is one God, right? But if you talk about God, to me, that kind of puts it out there. The word God, and I don't have a problem with the word God, but it is kind of separating, right? And so the whole thing is that what's really going on is that we feel separated from our bodies. We also feel separated from our emotions. We really walk around in pieces, kind of. Here's the emotional me, here's the physical me, here's the spiritual me. And it's this whole thing that we're going to be talking about is how to bring that all together, integrate ourselves, and become whole. And when we become whole, then we can become whole. All of these people, and these are just like some of the books I have on healing, all of these people use the word perfection. And they were writing in a time when our culture didn't have a perfection complex like we do now, right? How many people deal with perfectionism? Probably more than one person in this room. And so what they're talking about is that the blueprint for us, our blueprint, is to be a healthy person. And so they use the word perfect to help people get the idea of coming back to what we're meant to be. But in this culture, when I say something is perfect, I can just see all of the baggage around that, for people. It's like, well, I have to be perfect. I've got to make my body perfect. That's not our goal. Our goal is to be as healthy and happy and as integrated as we can be. And we come at it from that point on Sundays a lot from, this is how you think and what you can do in your life, but we don't talk a lot about deep healing on Sundays. And that's because partly it's just such a deep subject, and this is not something I think to be, trifled with. And I was even like, is 3 hours going to be enough of this? But I think it's enough. It will be enough to get people started. So the first thing that we am I? Oh, there we go. Okay, let me move this so it's my microphone. The first thing that we're going to be looking at is how we're really made. Now, we say that there is one God. We'll say that God is within us. We'll say that, there's no difference between us. But how do we really integrate that and understand it and make it real to us? So the first idea is that energy cannot be destroyed or created. And we all learned this in school, or we should have, is that you cannot destroy energy. And I was thinking about that day, so we're all made out of the same stuff. This table is made out of atoms. The same stuff that I'm made out of, it's just how those atoms are arranged. It's like the chairs in this room are arranged in a certain way right now. When we rearrange them, it becomes a different setup. If I arrange the atoms in this by hitting it with a hammer, it's going to be different. So it's really if you think in terms of it's only about how my atoms are arranged, then that starts, to me, break up this idea that something is permanent and real and stuck. So we're all made out of atoms, And since nothing can be destroyed or created, it occurred to me today that we're all made from recycled materials. I hadn't thought about that. It was like, wait a minute, it's just recycled. It's like the water that we drink is hundreds, thousands of years old. Everything that is here has always been here and always will be. It just gets rearranged. And so if we start thinking of healing in terms of rearranging our thinking and rearranging our atoms, then I think that gives us something to work with. Because for me, when I was first learning this, I would go into meditation and I would, say, I would get into that place where I am one and try to get there and really become one with the presence and realize that one with the presence and then know that I was completely healthy. But that seemed like such a big leap. It was such a big leap from me being here in my body to being one with the presence. And those moments come, absolutely those moments come where we are that connected. But it really takes some learning to be able to get into that space. And part of that learning is learning how to think about it, how to think about, and so I will make suggestions like some of these kind of ideas that I have, but I will encourage you to think about it in your own way. It's like, for me, it really works to think about that I'm a bunch of atoms that I can rearrange. I can work with that. And it doesn't mean that I'm not connecting with spirit. It means that what I'm doing is I'm acknowledging that every bit of me is spirit, is God, is the intelligent energy, and I can work with it. We become co-creators, and so this body that every one of us is in is an extremely intelligent being. Even without our brain, even without our consciousness, it's an extremely intelligent being, and it will do whatever it needs to survive. I don't know if you've ever had a situation where you kind of thought you were okay, but somehow you were uncomfortable, and your body had a reaction to it. Have you ever had that happen? Now, a couple of weeks ago, it's like I decided to do this class, and then I got a classic example of what your body can do for you. We decided to do an MRI on my hips just to see if my legs are going to fall off. I'm not having a lot of problems, but we just thought we would look to see what was going on. I'm claustrophobic. I told him that. So I went in and I got in the machine, and they took me in, and my head was still sticking out, so I could see the lights and everything. And I thought, I can do this. And what I didn't know is that she was going to put a plate on top of me, a plate behind me, and then strap me down, and then I would be in this thing and I would not. Oh, and she tied my toes together to open up my hips, which caused considerable pain. She sliced me into this thing, and I am, of course, completely trapped. And she gave me she said, just squeeze this. If you need me, just squeeze this. And I thought, all right, I can do this. I'm a big girl. I'm a metaphysician. I can think my way through this. And so I'm doing okay. But it turned out I was going to be in there for a full half hour. And the thing is, have anybody had an MRI? You know how noisy they are? Okay. So I have the earplugs and I'm in there, and then every once in a while she adjusted just a little bit. And every time I thought I was going to go in. But I was laying there and I'm going, Christ before me, Christ behind me, any mantra that I could think of. And I was really kind of all okay. And then I don't know if I just tried to move my shoulder or something. My body completely freaked out. And I just started sobbing. Now my brain was still like, I'm going, okay, you're going to be okay. I just went to pieces. And as soon as that particular one was over, I said, how much longer? And she said, I'll be right there. And she came in, and then she had to say, well, you could have pushed the little bulb. No, I couldn't have, because my body went into fight or flight. Without my conscious mind saying, we got to get out of here, my body went into survival mode. And it was, God, it was horrible. And it was also the best example I could bring into a class like this. So I'm like, yeah, thanks. To watch my body, and I could feel my cells just desperately needing to be free, to get out and move around. And so, she said, you're going to have to come back. And I'm going, no, honey, I'm not. You will have to come into my house at night, drug me, kidnap me, put me to sleep. I mean, it will be a while before I can bring myself to do it, even if I'm sedated. It was really, and if I think about it, my body still kind of goes, But, so I sat in the car and I had a good cry. I let my body work it out. I didn't fight it. It was like, okay, so how am I going to help my body heal from this trauma? And then I called my husband, and he said, well, don't drive for a little bit. Okay. Then I think I don't know if I called my friend Patty, and it was like, but I thought, I'm still thinking about what my body did on its own. The intelligence of those cells knowing that it was in danger. It felt like it was in danger. And it also taught me how I know what it was. It was on a Saturday. So thank goodness, I came the next day and I was speaking. And so I hadn't finished my talk. So I had, I was able to sit down that night, get into doing my talk. That helped calm my body down. And then coming and going through 2 services and all the music and everything. By the time I was done with all that and kind of winded a couple of people about it, my body really settled down. But if I think about going back into I saw a picture of one of those machines today, and I could feel my body, not just my mind, but my body go, I don't think so. And so that understanding that our bodies have their own intelligence, and then we have our logic and our mental abilities on top of that, and what's happening so often when we're working on healing is that there's no we aren't connected. We're not really in tune with what our bodies are doing, and so part of what we're going to be learning here is how to start to come into that alignment so that we can respect our bodies. For one thing, it's like I could have really said, man, that was really stupid, and I was a little bit embarrassed. But then after I thought about it for a while, I thought, my body was taking care of us. All of me. My body was taking care of me. And we think so much in terms of taking care of our bodies. So if we can, turn this thinking around a little bit and start to understand where that wholeness, that oneness that happens no matter what kind of condition your body feels like it's in at the time. So, there's that part. There's the part of just giving it over, and it's like someone said, either dissolve, saying I can dissolve this, or acknowledging it and then moving through it. And we're going to talk a lot about the vocabulary that we should be using, and I might get into that a little bit tonight because what I prepared here isn't quite a lot of stuff. I thought it was more than it is. But, it's like, how do we talk to ourselves? And I really want to do a deep exercise next week about that. But have you ever heard somebody say, well, she's dealing with her cancer? Well, or my headache. What are you doing when you say it's my headache? Yeah, you're getting to keep it. You're claiming it as your own. And so a lot of this changing your thinking about illness, about dis-ease, is learning how to talk about it, learning how to relate to it. And just because something's happened doesn't mean you're wrong or that you're doing something wrong. And there are people who've been in this teaching for a long time who, they won't even admit that they've got a cold, or they won't admit to anything not being quite right with their body, because then it's like, well, I'm not a good metaphysician. I'm not doing it right. There's something wrong with me. Bad metaphysician. And it's true. And But that's not, I mean, but it's true that they do that, but it's not true. It's like we all do the best we can in any one moment. The best thing I ever read Ernest Holmes say was somebody said something about, I think Ernest Holmes had a cold or something, and then someone said, well, and he says, it's okay. He says, sometimes we forget. Sometimes we forget, we get so wrapped up in the material world, right? And we believe so much in all the stuff that goes on. Do you remember in the olden days when we all watched TV with commercials? And come September, the commercials would change from whatever they were to cold season is coming. And they would advertise cold and flu, and they do it different ways now, but back then it was just like we were all watching the same thing all the time. And so we were being taught that there was a flu season, there was a cold season, and that we had to go out and get this extra strength, whatever it is, and that we had to keep going. That was the other part, right? Do you have a cold? Can't stop? Okay, come take this magical thing. All of that goes contrary to what we're teaching. It's like, if something's going on with your body, stop, take care of it. And think about what's going on in your life that might be bringing this disharmony to your body. But they advertise, of course, now they advertise all kinds of scary drugs, right? It's like, they have to have that disclaimer for 5 minutes after the ad because of all the things that happen to you when you take it. But that whole idea that we're taught, we are meant to be healthy, and yet we are taught that all these horrible things can happen to our bodies. So much of this is about learning to think of ourselves in terms of being part of an intelligent system. I talk about myself as we sometimes, not in the royal we, but in terms of all of us together here, all of these cells, all of the cells in my body doing this project, this Deborah project together. And when I start thinking in those terms, I feel better, and I am able to overcome different things that are going on. And as you get older, of course, more things start to go on. Because that's just, yes, Patty.
Hi, I'm Renee.
Hi.
Thank you for your talk so far. It just dawned on me when you were talking about the project of ourselves that recently I was diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer, and I was about to go into a surgery, and I thought, all the people telling me, oh, kick cancers, you know what, and you got this, you can fight against it, and all I thought was like, I don't really want to be in a fight against my body right now. I don't think it's the answer I'm looking for right before I go under, this knife. And so there was a small tumor, and I, for whatever reason in the moment before I went under, I thought this is kind of like an alien I invited to grow and to be on my planet, and it was here to teach me some things that I really needed to learn because I was in some kind of a fog. And then I just kind of peacefully said, you can go now, in this experience, and thank you. And I don't know if that's going to help, but I just didn't feel like it could hurt. It just felt like the right thing. And it's a little out there, but it just, when you start thinking about how things aren't always bad, they're just part of the process. So I wanted to share that real quick.
Thank you for that, because one of the things that some people here have heard me say a lot is that when you fight something, you get to keep it. So I'm never fighting a cold. If I have one, I'm recovering. I'm always recovering from the cold, whether it started 5 minutes ago or whether it's like we're in day 3. And I don't get colds very often, but it's always I'm recovering from, or I have been diagnosed, or I have, and I really want to spend some time next week really working on this phraseology and how we talk to ourselves and getting very deeply into that. But I wanted to have a handout for you and for us to really be able to spend time writing, because there's a thing called affirmation or denial and affirmation. And Ernest Holmes calls it something different. And every time I try to teach denial and affirmation, people get really stuck on the denial part. So I'm going to teach it differently next week, and we'll spend most of our time on that. But the fighting implies resistance. And there's a difference between acknowledging something and saying, I don't want to keep it, which is what you're saying, and I'm fighting this and I'm going to resist it, and because that's a negative energy. And also when you're fighting something, you're paying a lot of attention to it. When you're I'm recovering from this, I'm doing these things to take care of myself, you're not focusing on the issue, you're focusing on the solution. And so thank you for that. That's the perfect example. In fact, that's the whole class. We can go to coffee now. But we are so taught to think in terms of, we're actually in terms of, oh my gosh, or I did a podcast on called Get Over the Ain't It Awfuls. I mean, yes, Patty.
Oh, no.
No, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that my husband had a knee replacement about 6 months ago. And at the same time, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I have listened to Deborah's podcast, The Ain't It Awfuls. And I'm telling you, it really does happen. And I'm so grateful that my husband and I have the same philosophy, and we never went down the, oh my gosh, what's going to happen. I'm not saying that there wasn't some fear involved, but he had the knee replacement, and then 6 weeks later, he started 28 treatments of radiation for the prostate cancer. And we were so blessed to have wonderful medical staff. And my husband was a Christian Scientist, which he did not go to the doctor for 40 years. And then things changed as he got older. And what I want to say is we never were like terrified about the diagnosis. We just, okay, we go to these treatments and stuff. And I have to share this. On the 28th day, when we went into the radiation office, he got a certificate. He got you graduated from 28 days of radiation with smile and good attitude and all this. And they put dinosaur stickers, princess stickers, and they all signed it. And my husband said something like, oh, that kind of thing's for kids, but I'm telling you, he loved it. It was the sweetest thing for them to do. And so now it's 6 months later, he's golfing twice a week, he's bowling, and he just got the results, which is very early, only 3 months post-radiation, and the cancer's gone. So he never owned it, just like Deborah was talking about. He never said my cancer and stuff, and I totally agree with Deborah that the words and how you think about it are so important.
Yeah, somebody yesterday, I just hear it all the time. It's like, well, she's dealing with her cancer, or my this, or even my diagnosis. I mean, it's like I received a diagnosis is very different from my diagnosis. And so part of this learning to think differently about it is, and like I said, we will get into writing this stuff out and learning how to really change our thoughts, is thinking about it in terms of, okay, this is something that's happening, but and I'm not going to pretend like it's not happening. I'm not going to go, I never saw, anything with Patty and her husband going, oh, no, it's not happening. I'm just going to pretend like everything's good. They were very much present that this is something and it needs to be dealt with, and we're going to do everything we can. But I never heard, in fact, even now, Patty, you didn't say his cancer, you said the cancer. There's a lot of difference between mine and the. And it seems like such a small thing, but it's probably one of the most important parts of the whole thing, is because you're talking to yourself the whole time you're talking to yourself. And remember, and I'm going to be repeating this probably a lot, is that every cell in our body is an intelligent being, and it hears what we say. Bruce Lipton wrote a book called The Biology of Belief. And I was in Tower Books when they had the used bookstore, and I walked by it one day and I looked at it and I went, nah. And I walked by it again another day and I went, nah. And the next time it kind of just threw itself at me. So I brought it home, and I read it. And he went against the entire biology community. I'm talking internationally. In the research that he did, and he said, we all tend to think of ourselves as working from the inside out, the way we're taught, right? Cells work from the outside in. They operate from the inner information that they get coming into them. And he's done a lot of work on this. It's a very thin book, and the sciencey part isn't that bad, but the conclusion he came to, and now of course there's slowly starting to accept what he's saying, and there's other people on that same bandwagon. But everything that comes into us, every energy, every vibration that comes into our bodies and into our minds affects us. And there's a man who channels a being called Cryon. And one of the things that they talk about in that series is doing ceremony about things. It's like, do ceremony. Getting your coffee in the morning, you're doing ceremony around that, right? I mean, they just, but I say when you're doing ceremony around healing or fixing yourself, say it out loud so that the biology hears you. And when I was recovering myself from that trauma, the machine trauma, I was talking to my body. I started saying out loud, I say, everybody, we're safe, you're safe. I kept talking to my cells. I kept saying, we are safe, we're okay. And I could tell, I started to calm down. You could say that I was just calming my mind down. Well, maybe, but I could feel, I know that my body triggered itself on its own. My conscious mind didn't do that. I wasn't laying there thinking, oh my God. I wasn't happy, but I wasn't thinking, oh my God. And my body, triggered. So when I talk to it, something happens. And so saying it out loud is really, really good. You don't have to do it all the time, but, and so we will get practice on that as well. But looking at the whole idea of what do we believe? What do we believe about disease? What do we believe about our bodies? What do we want to accomplish in understanding what spiritual mental healing is about? Because the truth is that, have you ever heard of people who have something and they go to the doctor and it gets cured, but then like another month or down the road they've got something else, and then they've got something else, and then they've got something else? Well, there's something more going on than just a faulty body, right? And that's where we're going to be talking about the whole mental part of it is that what do we believe? And that's where the exercises come in is looking at what do you believe about something. It's like right now, if I asked you to do an affirmation, let's say, okay, so say this, and we'll get more practice next week, but so if you were to say an affirmation right now, it's like, I am perfectly healthy. Just close your eyes and say that to yourself for a minute. Okay, now, what kind of back talk do you get? What do you hear yourself saying about that? How many people got something like, yeah, right? Or some version of that? Pardon? I was believing. Okay, yeah. But you know what I mean, though? It's like, it's just like this situation is, I can't even think of an example offhand, but, it's like there is, there's no such thing as a headache. That's one of the ways that they talked in the early 1900s, and is that there is no early 1900s. I can't believe I said that. I know, but like in 1920, they would say, you declare there is no such thing as a headache. Well, my back talk, even to this day, is going to say, yeah, but I'm feeling it. And so then I have to go, okay, I'm feeling this. How do I work through that? Because I can't just simply deny its existence. I'm experiencing it. And so then it's like, okay, yeah, Carol, wait for Mike, thank you.
Sometimes I do realize I have a headache.
Yeah,
And oh, isn't that interesting? I wonder how that happened.
yeah,
And I just let it go,
Yeah.
and before long, it's not there anymore.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that rigid denying that it exists thing that was taught back then, it worked for them. But we are a very different culture than from 1920. And so for me, when I was learning this, I was in my 20s when I started studying this. It was like, yeah, but honestly, there is a headache. So I started learning how to dissolve it. It's like I don't need this anymore, or I don't want it. Like that's kind of what you do. I don't need this. I don't need you in my life. I allow you to go away right now. But when we're talking about the whole process of healing yourself, but also working with other people, we're going to be talking about not just how to heal yourself, but how do you do this healing work for other people as well? How do you start to realize that oneness and do what we basically would be calling distance healing, because we're not going to be talking about laying on of hands. There's nothing wrong with that. There's so many ways to do healing that, and we're talking about doing it mentally through spirit. And so the whole process is learning how to clear your mind of all of those doubts, of all of the beliefs in the ain't it awfuls and the oh my goshes. And how do I clear my mind? How do I get into tune with that energy so that I can be a clear conduit to allow this condition, whatever it is, to dissipate, to dissolve, I use the word dissolve, and I was in some class and somebody said, I don't think I can use dissolve. And it's like, okay, for me, that just makes, it works for my brain. So please remember when we're talking about this, if I use a word that you don't relate to, that's my word, it's not yours. You please come up with what works for you, because if you try to fit yourself into some mold, then it's not as effective. And so, anything that I do is a suggestion. And I really, really encourage people to find their own way. And like I said, in week 3, we will learn to write a treatment or a prayer, and we will look at unity. Unity has a 5-step, and Science of Mind has a 5-step. And we will look at both of those, and then, I'm sure a lot of you will get really creative and come up with your own way of doing it. And that's the most glorious thing that can happen, is when you can make it your own. And so it's like we want to make the healing, we want to make the light our own, and allow whatever kind of disharmony, we learn to send that away, to dissipate it, to dissolve it, to rise above it. And a lot of that will also be talking about fear. I mean, we've had some very good examples here with the more that you get into fear, the more you get to keep something. And fear is completely natural. So this is a combination of learning how to acknowledge it, not let it freak you out, and get in touch with the spirit all at the same time. Now, I hope this made some sense. Next week, there'll be more structure to this, but I just wanted to get us started. And we will very much talk about, I'm going to actually have a list of different kinds of vocabulary to use and not use. And we're going to talk about writing denials and affirmations, but I have a different way of teaching it so that we can, get into that. And is anybody else, we're almost out of time, believe it or not. Yes, sir.
Is there any similarity to this thinking to what they were teaching a while ago called biofeedback?
It's all the same kind of thing. Yes, absolutely. Biofeedback is a very specific technique, and it is getting your, learning to work with your body to affect changes. It's not exact. I mean, we're talking about doing more than that. But yes, it's all part of the same thing. When we when we are in tune with our bodies and we're in alignment with the intelligence, the infinite intelligence that works in and through of us, then we can affect changes in our bodies. Does that make any sense? Yeah, so they're all, they're all related. They're all related, and they just, everybody comes at it differently. Mesmer came at it through hypnosis, and then Quimby, he used some of that, but then they just started discovering that if you can get your, it's about focus. It's about, where you put your interest, what you're looking at, where you spend most of your time. And it's like if you spend most of your time in, this is horrible and awful, the whole ain't it awfuls thing, then that's what you're going to get. And if you spend more of your time in, there's really good in this life. It's like that experience with the machine thingy. There's so much good that has come out of that. I really learned something that I didn't know about my body. I knew that my body was, skewed in terms of being healthy. I don't think I've ever had my body stand up for me so much as it did in that moment, because I've never had, that kind of experience. I've had moments when I was frightened or something, but that was so, it was so disconnected from anything because I wasn't really in danger. But my body thought I was. It could not handle that kind of confinement. And so that taught me more than practically anything. And one of the notes that I made doing this is that, the truth is only the truth for you once you've experienced it. So I've had a lot of experience with healing over the years, but that moment of having my body do this whole thing, and basically it was standing up for me, that was a whole new experience for me, and it was not fun, and I'm very grateful for it. Yeah, and of course the timing, right? Just before I started this class. So let's just take a moment for a short meditation, and then we'll be done for tonight. And thank you for participating. I love it when, this is a class, so other people get to talk. So just take a nice deep breath. And bring your attention slowly down to your heart center. And then to your heart itself. And just be grateful for what this amazing, amazing being does within your body. The heart gives more information to the brain than the brain does to the heart. But together they co-create who you are. And sitting in gratitude and awe of how amazing the intelligence is within your body, that it knows. It knows what to do. Your heart knows what to do. Your liver knows. Your lungs know. Your blood knows. Every cell in your body knows what it is there for, what it's supposed to do. And that is an amazing, amazing thing. And knowing that sometimes disharmony does interrupt the flow. But reminding yourself that as you become in touch with this intelligence, this love that makes up your body, you can always return to this love, to this wholeness, to this oneness. There is one presence and one power in the universe. And it makes up the atoms that make up the cells that make up your body and the energy that makes up your mind. And there is no separation. Mind, body, spirit is all one. And just feeling that for a moment is sometimes all you need. Because you carry that moment with you forever. And you can return to that moment whenever you want to or need to. So take a nice deep breath, bring yourselves back. And next week we will talk much more about the mind-body, body-mind connection. I noticed in one of these books I had written in the side, I'd written body, mind, spirit, all as one word. Back in 1970 something, I'd written it all as one word. And I thought that was interesting. And so I would just like to remind, perhaps Ira, the people online, thank you, that if you would like to contribute to the Spiritual Life Center, that you can text SLC Love at 44321. Of course, you can go to our website and click on the donate button. And of course, you can mail a donation into us if you would like. And also, if you want to continue to spread this, this consciousness, click on like and all those other things that you can do depending on the app that you're on. And we really appreciate your watching us, and I appreciate your being with us today. And why don't we do the prayer for protection together? One thing about a small group is we can all touch. Okay, let's take a nice deep breath and let it go. Together. The light of God surrounds us. I am the light of God. The love of God enfolds us. I am the love of God. The power of God protects us. I am the power of God. The presence of God watches over us. I am the presence of God. Wherever we are, God is, I am, and all is well. May the joys of the world go with you. And one time somebody said, there's handouts. I didn't bring my glasses. Bring your glasses next week. There's going to be handouts. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.